The Michael Gaine case exposed just how broken the Irish police really are. Michael Gaine was a quiet farmer from Kerry. No enemies, no criminal past, just a man who lived alone on his land until he disappeared. They didn't just find his body. They found parts of it stuffed inside his own farm's slurry tank in what locals called one of the most disturbing crime scenes they've ever heard of. And yet somehow the guard didn't treat it as suspicious for weeks. They missed obvious signs, neighbors raised red flags, and still no one was arrested. It took public pressure, media outrage, and embarrassment for them to even admit something was wrong. Let's be blunt, if the Michael Gaine case proved anything, it's that something in Irish policing is seriously broken. This wasn't just a sloppy investigation, it was a failure to act, to protect, to investigate like professionals. And the scary part, this isn't the first time the Guard have completely dropped the ball. In this video, we're diving into 10 real, verified cases where Ireland's police force wasn't just incompetent, they were negligent, corrupt, or outright dangerous. From a cop hiring a hitman to planted evidence, fake informants, sexual coercion, and cover-ups that should have made global headlines. This isn't about hating the Guard. It's about asking the hard questions Irish people have every right to ask. Who's holding them accountable? And how many more failures are still being hidden? This sounds like a bad Netflix script, but it's not fiction. It's real, and it happened inside the Irish police force. In early 2025, a serving guard in North Dublin was placed under internal investigation after he allegedly tried to hire a hitman on the dark web to kill his former partner. Let's be clear here. This wasn't a rumor. This was confirmed by multiple senior sources inside the force and reported publicly by the Irish Sun in May 2025. The officer used online channels linked to illegal marketplaces and paid money expecting the job to be carried out. But here's the twist: the hitman he contacted wasn't a hitman at all, just a scammer pretending to be one. So not only did this officer try to commit a serious, premeditated crime, he got conned in the process. Now, you'd assume someone in uniform caught trying to arrange a murder would be in custody, charged, arrested. But no. Instead, the guard was quietly suspended. No arrest, no public charges, no transparency. The anti-corruption unit is reportedly handling it, but there's been no update since. And that's the part that should worry every Irish citizen watching this. If you or I did this, we'd be behind bars already. But in this case, it's just under review. So the question becomes, how does a member of law enforcement even get to this point and still walk free? Who's really watching the guard? Now let's talk about something that isn't just illegal, it's sickening. Some guard, not all, but enough to raise alarm, have been accused of using their uniform, their badge, and their power to pursue women in vulnerable situations. And we're not talking about normal dating. We're talking about coercion. Women who had just experienced domestic abuse, women who had called for help, and instead of protection, some of them got targeted. In March 2024, Garda Commissioner Drew Harris himself confirmed publicly that certain guard had misused their authority to pursue inappropriate sexual relationships. He stated clearly, "There have been allegations, some of which we know to be true, where officers used their power in ways that crossed a line into deeply unethical behavior. These aren't just bad apples. This is a system with blind spots so big, abusers in uniform slipped through. Some officers met women through domestic violence calls and followed up privately, not for protection, but for personal reasons. One guard was accused of texting a woman days after helping her escape an abusive partner and asking her out. And that's just one of several internal cases being investigated under the Force's Professional Standards Unit. But here's the disturbing part. Many of these women never reported it out of fear. Fear of not being believed. Fear of retaliation. Because who do you call when it's the police who cross the line? The problem isn't just the act, it's the silence. When officers use their power like a weapon, it's not misconduct, it's predatory. And unless it's stopped, it sends a message. The badge protects you even when you're the one hurting people. This isn't just a scandal, it's one of the darkest chapters in Irish policing history. The Donegal Guard didn't just make mistakes, they manufactured entire cases out of thin air. Between 1996 and 2004, the Guard in County Donegal were exposed for a wide web of corruption, lies, and evidence fabrication. It was so bad, it led to the formation of the Morris Tribunal, a public inquiry set up by the Irish government itself to investigate what went wrong. What they found was shocking. The Guard planted fake explosives and pretended they were real era finds, invented intelligence reports to justify bogus operations, created fictitious informants and false threat assessments, pressured junior officers into staying silent or else. This wasn't one rogue cop. It was an entire Garda district acting with reckless impunity. One of the most infamous cases involved a man named Frank McBrearty Jr., who was falsely accused of murder based on evidence that was completely fabricated by Garda. His family was targeted and harassed for years, all to protect corrupt officers and boost arrest stats. The tribunal's final report used words like systemic dishonesty, institutional cover-up, and a culture of concealment. Think about that. The Guard faked terrorist activity and innocent people almost lost their freedom because of it. This scandal wasn't a rumor. It was proven, documented, and published in hundreds of pages of tribunal findings. It cost taxpayers millions in legal payouts and compensation. And yet only a handful of officers were fired. Many kept their pensions. Some retired quietly. So here's the question. If faking bombs, inventing informants, and nearly framing an innocent man doesn't result in full accountability, what message does that send to every other corrupt officer still out there? Now imagine this. You get arrested, you call your solicitor, you speak privately, thinking your conversation is confidential, protected by law. But it turns out the Guard might have been recording the call the entire time. For decades, hundreds of Guard stations across Ireland had phone systems secretly recording both incoming and outgoing calls, including conversations between suspects and their lawyers. This wasn't an isolated case or an accident. It was systemic. The scandal was exposed in 2014 when a routine legal case revealed that the station had recorded privileged calls. What followed was a nationwide panic about just how deep the breach went. And it gets worse. No one knows for sure when the recordings started or how many were stored. Many of these calls were never disclosed in court. Some may have involved lawyers, journalists, and even TD's members of parliament. The fallout was massive. Commissioner Martin Cullinan resigned. A retired High Court judge was appointed to investigate. Legal experts warned it could undermine thousands of criminal cases. And just like that, trust was shattered. Because if solicitor-client privilege, the most basic protection in a justice system, isn't safe in a Guard station, then what is? This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a decades-long abuse of power, hidden until they got caught. And even after all that, no one was prosecuted. No Guard went to jail. So again, we ask, how does a national police force get away with secretly recording citizens for years and walk away untouched? Now this one hurts. Maurice McCabe wasn't some outsider. He wasn't a journalist. He wasn't a criminal. He was a loyal, decorated guard sergeant who believed in the uniform, believed in justice. And when he discovered serious problems inside the guard, like the mishandling of assault cases, traffic offenses being wiped from the system, and cover ups of internal failures, he did what a good officer is supposed to do. He blew the whistle. But instead of listening, instead of investigating, the guard, his own colleagues and superiors tried to destroy him. And that's not exaggeration. It's what the Disclosures Tribunal led by Mr. Justice Peter Charlton confirmed as fact. Here's what happened. McCabe made official complaints through internal channels starting in 2008. Senior figures in the Guard began smearing his name, claiming he had questions to answer. The most disturbing moment came when a false accusation of sexual abuse was entered into a social work file, even though there was no complaint, no victim, and no case. This lie followed him for years, damaging his career, mental health, and family life. The tribunal later ruled there was a campaign, an orchestrated campaign to ruin Maurice McCabe's reputation. All for speaking the truth. The damage didn't end with him. The scandal led to the resignations of the Garda Commissioner Martin Collinan and the Minister for Justice Alan Shatter. It exposed how deep the culture of silence and retaliation ran within the Guard. Let's be absolutely clear. McCabe was 100% vindicated. The abuse he suffered was proven, documented, and exposed in a public inquiry. So here's the question every viewer should sit with. If the system treats a whistleblower like Maurice McCabe this way, what chance does a regular citizen have? This one would be funny if it wasn't so disturbing. In 2023, a private cleaning company working inside Guard headquarters made a shocking discovery. A locker tucked away in the basement of Harcourt Square, Dublin, containing 8 kilos of cocaine. Estimated street value around 500,000 euros. And no, this wasn't an active evidence locker. It wasn't part of an ongoing investigation. It was just there, forgotten, unlabeled, unsecured. No proper documentation. No chain of custody. No explanation. The worst part? Guard sources admitted they had no idea how long it had been there or who logged it in the first place. That's how chaotic and disorganized things were behind the scenes. This isn't a rumor. It was published in the Sun Ireland and confirmed by senior Guard officials. Now think about the implications. That cocaine could have gone missing, stolen, resold. If private staff hadn't found it, no one would have even known it existed. And if that's what's happening in the national headquarters, what's happening in smaller stations across the country? This wasn't just a storage issue. It was a total collapse of evidence handling protocols. Imagine if that locker was part of a murder case or tied to a gangland trial. It would have compromised the entire investigation. And once again, no one was held accountable. So ask yourself this. How do you misplace 500,000 euros worth of drugs inside a police building and walk away without a single consequence? This one's not about corruption. This one's about neglect, and it ended in death. In June 2020, Detective Gard Colm Horkin was shot dead with his own service weapon during a struggle in Castlerea, County Roscommon. He was a well-respected, highly experienced officer. The entire nation mourned him. But behind the tragedy was a detail most people missed. Gard had been warning for years that their holsters, the ones used to secure their pistols, were faulty. Officers complained that the retention mechanisms were unreliable, especially during physical confrontations. Some said the weapons could be pulled out too easily by attackers. And yet, nothing changed. By the time Horkin was killed, those same defective holsters were still in circulation. No upgrade, no urgent safety fix. They knew there was a risk and they left it anyway. The weapon used to shoot Horkin was his own Sig Sauer, taken from his holster during a scuffle with a man who had a known mental health history and a history of violence. A death that may have been preventable had the gear been properly reviewed and replaced. Let's make something clear here. This wasn't an accident. This was a system failure, one caused by inaction at the top and paid for in blood by someone doing his job. And the question that still hangs in the air is, how many more officers are carrying equipment they can't trust because someone in management is too slow or too indifferent to act when the people protecting us aren't even being protected themselves? That's not a force, that's a failure. Here's what happens when bad leadership meets no accountability. In 2023, the Guard quietly agreed to pay out €250,000 to Assistant Commissioner Fintan Fanning after wrongly suspending him over unproven allegations. Let that sink in. A senior officer was taken off duty based on accusations that were never pursued in court, and then paid €250,000 to make it go away. This wasn't some public disciplinary process. There was no trial, no hearing, no transparency. Just internal chaos, a botched suspension, and a massive taxpayer-funded settlement to cover up the fallout. Fanning had spent 4 years on leave defending himself while the Guard refused to clarify whether the claims even justified his suspension. Eventually, the legal threat became too big and they settled out of court, quietly, privately, without taking public responsibility. Reported by the Times UK, the case exposed something deeply troubling. The Guard can sideline their own people without due process, then write a six-figure check when it backfires. No explanation, no apology. Just more public money spent cleaning up behind bad decisions. This isn't just unfair to Fanning, it's unfair to the Irish people, to every officer trying to do the right thing, to every citizen wondering how many other cases are being buried with cash instead of consequences. So here's the question. When internal accountability costs €250,000 a mistake, how many other screw-ups are simply being bought off and swept under the rug? Let's make one thing very, very clear. This video isn't anti-Guard. This is pro-accountability. We're not here to attack Irish police officers who put their lives on the line every day. We're not ignoring the real dangers, the long hours, or the sacrifices. But when systems break, when corruption is covered up, when evidence goes missing, when justice is silenced, someone has to speak. What we've shown you in this video are not conspiracy theories. They're public facts. They've been confirmed by tribunals, investigations, court documents, and national news outlets. And yet, how many of these scandals ended with? No one fired, no one jailed, no explanation to the public. From a guard trying to hire a hitman, to evidence planted in Donegal, to secret phone recordings, lost cocaine, predatory abuse of power, and faulty gear that got one of their own killed. This isn't a few bad apples. This is a cultural problem. So here's the final question. How much are Irish citizens supposed to ignore before they start demanding real reform? You can support Guard and still demand better from them. You can respect the uniform and still call out the ones who disgrace it. Because in the end, it's simple. If you love your country, you hold it to a higher standard.